Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the ink-stained corridors of the Tang Dynasty, right as the moon is high over Chang'an. You're barefoot wrapped in a thin hemp robe following the dim light of an oil lantern as it swings from a bureaucrat's hand. The air smells of wet parchment horse sweat and that unmistakable tang of burned sesame oil. Somewhere a rooster crows far too early or far too late, and you can already feel the looming weight of official documents bearing down like a sack of millet on your shoulders. You're about to begin your shift in the most stressful job. No one ever glamorizes the imperial courier system. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. Not without a quill wound, chronic saddle rash, or an unfortunate misplacement of a tax edict. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you tuning in from, and what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So, the Tang Dynasty. Golden age of Chinese culture, poetry, and progress. Right? That's what the textbooks say, but no one ever tells you what it was like to actually work in Tang society, especially in the tangle of government logistics. If you've ever cursed at a slow email server, imagine managing 15,000 miles of official communication with no Wi-Fi, no printers, and horses that bite. This was a world where delivering mail wasn't a job. It was a test of loyalty, endurance, and bladder control. You begin your night shift with a bang, literally. A bronze gong echoes through the relay station. Another urgent dispatch from Chang'an. The emperor's calligraphy is apparently too sacred for delay. You trudge out, boots still damp from yesterday's storm, and mount a pony that hates you. Your mission: deliver a 5-foot scroll containing revised tax policy to a prefect 300 miles away before sunrise. No pressure. You pass through tight alleys lined with glowing lanterns. A sleepy monk waves from his incense stall, then yawns directly into a brazier. The horse stumbles. You both feel the same way about this assignment. Somewhere along the wall you spot the first of many government slogans painted in lacquer red. Speed upholds the mandate of heaven. Right. The Tang Dynasty's postal system was massive, one of the most advanced in the pre-modern world. Hundreds of stations, thousands of workers, all spinning the wheels of bureaucracy like over-caffeinated spiders. These weren't casual couriers either. They were expected to memorize topography relay timetables, and which official got offended if you addressed him with the wrong honorific. Legend says one unlucky runner delivered a scroll upside down and was made to run the entire route again backwards. You arrive at the first station just before midnight. There's a long queue of couriers handing off messages, their faces grim and sunburned. A teenage scribe with inky fingers takes your packet, unrolls it just far enough to check the seal, and nods like a judge at a rice cake competition. You're allowed 5 minutes to water the horse and pee, preferably not in that order. Historically speaking, Tang Dynasty emperors were obsessed with communication. They needed updates on border rebellions, rice production, poetry contests, and which cousin married which court musician. There was no room for error. Missing one report could make you look like you were part of the conspiracy. And yes, those happened, often. And no, they didn't end with polite reprimands. You're back on the road before your tea even cools. The relay network is impressive but deeply flawed. Mudslides knock out paths, bridges collapse, wolves. So many wolves. You hum a folk tune to yourself just to stay awake and consider if this scroll is really worth your last good pair of boots. Here's a fringe fact. Some historians believe that certain Tang relay runners trained by running up pagodas with bricks tied to their backs, not for strength but to get used to carrying scrolls through stairs gates and weirdly specific etiquette mazes. They also might have carried herbal lozenges made of licorice root to stay alert. modern Red Bull. Not quite, but it didn't taste like bat urine, so... Bonus. Now let's talk paperwork. The Tang loved paperwork, like modern people love cat videos. Every message was log-tagged, cross-referenced, and stored in ceramic jars sealed with wax and straw. If you didn't return the jar, you were fined. If you returned it chipped, you had to write a 400-character apology using only Confucian idioms. Historians still argue whether the Tang system was more efficient than its Roman or Persian counterparts. But one thing's clear, it was uniquely Tang. Meticulous, philosophical, deeply paranoid, and yet somehow poetic. Even the delays had style. Some scribes composed couplets on the backs of delivery manifests, a habit that got one poor scholar demoted when his poetry accidentally insulted a minister's beard. Back on the road, you cross a stone bridge as the river below murmurs like gossiping aunties. Your horse sighs. The stars begin to fade and a peach-colored haze curls on the horizon. A rooster crows again, this time from the right decade. You're almost there. The final station looms ahead, a tiled courtyard lit with flickering lanterns. You dismount with joints that feel about 3 centuries old and hand off the scroll to a clerk with breath like fermented tofu. He yawns, checks the seal, and waves you away like a bothersome pigeon. The work continues, and so do you. The sun hasn't even cleared the mountains yet, but you're already shuffling through a stack of transport forms, your fingers stained with ink and rice husk. The station master, an old man with eyebrows like lacquered paintbrushes, grunts as he slams down a carved stamp the size of a dumpling. Another scroll, certified. Another link in the bureaucratic chain, forged. You take your breakfast, squatting near a pile of dispatch crates, lukewarm millet porridge, with a dab of pickled mustard root. It's not glamorous, but at least it doesn't bite. The horse, now chewing on its saddle strap, looks equally unimpressed. But in this world, both of you are government assets, replaceable, recordable, and perpetually behind schedule. Sleep-deprived and smelling faintly of sesame oil and road dust, you now have a different task, supervising the flow of outgoing messages. A scribe hands you a wax-sealed tube, meant for a county governor, halfway across the province. You squint at the address. It's written in calligraphy, so formal it might be flirting with you. Too bad you're not allowed to open it. Not unless you want a surprise reassignment to latrine cleaning duty. Again. In truth, the Tang Dynasty wasn't just efficient, it was obsessive. Official communication ran on its own set of rules, laws, and symbolic flourishes. Messages were graded by urgency, marked with colored cords or slips of patterned silk. Red cord, probably a rebellion. Blue ribbon, maybe a harvest report or a love poem from a tipsy magistrate. No ribbon, still important, but not life or death, unless it was. Bureaucracy loves ambiguity. You remember a story told by one of the night scribes. A letter from the emperor once arrived at the wrong governor's desk because 2 districts had nearly identical names. A simple mix-up, sure, but it ended with 3 demotions, 1 accidental execution, and a new imperial policy banning rhyming province names. Quirky as it sounds, the Tang postal code was painfully literal. Couriers had to memorize not just routes, but the rank and personality of each recipient. Delivering to a prickly prefect, use 2 hands, bow twice, and don't mention his experimental poetry. Delivering to a Buddhist abbot, no shoes in the courtyard, and absolutely no meat-smelling lunch wrapped in your satchel. Your career could rise or fall based on how you unrolled a scroll. The current debate among historians, whether this hyper-ritualized delivery system made things more or less efficient. Some argue it instilled reverence, turning each letter into a ceremonial event. Others say it just added unnecessary drama to what could have been a fast, low-fuss message drop. Either way, it's clear the Tang Dynasty saw communication as sacred theater, not just practical logistics. As you check outgoing manifests, A young courier sprints in from the south gate, panting, soaked in sweat, and holding a message case like it's a cursed relic. The station master squints at it, sniffs the seal literally, and declares it probably urgent. Translation: get moving. You're assigned to escort this new dispatch north to a military outpost near the border where bandits and wild boars outnumber tax collectors. Yay. You saddle up again, bones cracking in protest, and hit the road. It's a long, rough ride, cobbled paths giving way to forest trails, the wind carrying the scent of pine needles and old rain. You pass a village where children play with carved wooden animals and old men spit beetle juice into the dust. A tea seller eyes you warily, then offers a free cup after seeing your official courier badge. Perks of the post: lukewarm jasmine tea and a slightly reduced risk of being robbed. Your horse, who now answers only to the name Sir Grumpy, trudges forward. The scroll bounces in its lacquered case at your side. You think about the hands that wrote it. The quill scratches the arguments over phrasing, the ink drying, while someone muttered about heavenly will. Every message in this system is the end product of a chain of people trying not to be blamed for anything. You make camp near a willow grove, tying the scroll case to your belt as you doze off against the saddle. The stars above twinkle with vague indifference. You wake up to a chorus of angry geese. Apparently, your resting spot was also their turf. Another courier hazard right next to snake and shoe and drunken monk sermon ambush. Once on the move again, you cross paths with another rider, a scholar with travel robes, hair, and a lopsided bun, and a horse that looks like it's seen better dynasties. You nod at each other, exchange station codes, and ride on. In the Tang world, couriers operated like invisible arteries crisscrossing the empire, often without recognition, always expected to deliver not just messages, but order, clarity, and a whole lot of seal stamps. A quirky tidbit: some elite messengers allegedly wore perfume-scented scroll tubes when delivering to imperial concubines or members of the Poetry Guild. Romance and postal protocol, a surprisingly common pair in the Tang archives. One letter even had a pressed flower hidden inside. The recipient married the sender 6 years later, or stabbed him. Records vary. You finally reach the outpost by mid-afternoon. It's a squat building of gray bricks, guarded by 2 soldiers who stare like you might turn into a tax audit. You show your badge, sign the transfer scroll, and hand over the tube. Another mission complete. No fanfare, no thanks. Just bureaucracy humming along like an overworked lute string. You take a moment to stretch, lean against a sun-warmed wall, and realize you've become part of something enormous, maddening, and kind of beautiful. The Tang postal system isn't just about messages, it's about movement, about connection, about the strange, very human belief that information matters even if it's wrapped in 6 layers of silk, signed in triplicate, and delayed by goose warfare. You're halfway back to your home station, riding along a trail bordered by chestnut trees and the occasional confused goat when the saddlebag starts to squeak. Not in a metaphorical uh-oh bureaucracy is leaking whey, but literally. A squeaky saddlebag, because tucked inside is your next assignment, a detailed courier handbook, annotated by no fewer than 6 calligraphers, and sealed with wax that smells faintly of plum wine. You're to study it. Apparently some noble back in Chang'an decided that couriers needed standardized moral instruction in addition to logistical direction. Because yes, delivering scrolls wasn't hard enough, you now need to carry virtue on your back too. The book is titled dramatically, On Upright Posture and the Avoidance of Gossip. Inside advice on personal hygiene: change your underrobes every 3 days. Ethical conduct: do not peek at love letters and horse etiquette. Always thank your steed. There's even a section on how to bow at varying degrees depending on the recipient's rank and current mood based on recent astrological movements. You start to wonder if this manual was written by Confucius or his more paranoid cousin. While the Tang postal system was technically run by the Ministry of Revenue, the guidelines for behavior often came from a strange mix of court poets, astrologers, and Confucian scholars with too much time and too many brushes. The result, a code of conduct that felt like a spiritual mashup between a postal guide and a guide to enlightenment. One of the rules you can't stop thinking about. If you must sneeze during delivery, turn westward lest the scroll absorb impure qi. You almost test it just to see what happens, but your nose behaves. Scholars still debate whether this mixture of postal logistics and philosophical restraint made the couriers more loyal or just deeply anxious. Some think it encouraged pride in the position. Others say it turned simple jobs into spiritual labyrinths. Either way, you've never met a courier who didn't carry both a dispatch scroll and a healthy fear of celestial missteps. You stop at a way station to rest. Its modest mud brick walls, bamboo cots, and a fire pit where someone's roasting radishes. There's an older courier sitting cross-legged sharpening a calligraphy brush with the calm precision of a monk preparing for war. He gestures for you to join him. Over a bowl of broth, he tells you about the 13 couriers who vanished, a legendary team that supposedly disappeared in the Gansu corridor after a paperwork error rerouted them to a non-existent prefecture. Their last known message, a supply requisition for 1 barrel plum wine, 6 lengths of rope, and a singing zither. Fiction maybe, but the story lives on in courier lore. A whispered reminder that maps can lie and that bureaucracy, when mixed with ambition and miscommunication, can open literal sinkholes in the earth. You make a mental note, never accept a route that includes Dragon Valley and unspecified oasis. The next leg of your journey passes through a market town, dusty, noisy, and full of smells that demand classification. You stop at a noodle stall. The owner, curious about your scroll tubes, asks if you're delivering edicts or love poems. You say, mostly weather reports. He shrugs. Same thing sometimes. There's a boy chasing a chicken through the square, a monk selling miniature statues of Lu Dongbin, and a scholar loudly reciting poems to no one in particular. Tang China is nothing if not poetic and chaotic in equal measure. As you rest your horse near the tea shop, a man wearing the robes of a low-level prefect bumps into you, knocking a scroll loose. You both dive for it, his face pale when he sees the red ribbon. Urgent, he asks. Only if it's still sealed, you reply. It is, barely. You rewrap it, checking for damage. In the courier world, a broken seal could cost you your fingers or your rank, depending on how cranky the recipient is. This level of fear might seem over the top, but in an age where the emperor's words traveled faster than his messengers, the integrity of the message mattered more than the messenger's health. You set out again, the path winding toward the hills. The landscape shifts, taller grasses, fewer villages, more open sky. You find yourself humming a tune you heard in Chang'an once, something about plum blossoms and tax audits. It was a love song, maybe. A quirky historical tidbit. Some elite couriers in the capital reportedly trained with dancers to improve their scroll-handling grace, ensuring that deliveries to nobles felt like choreographed rituals. You try a little flourish with your own handoff. At the next station, nearly drop the scroll. Decide to never try that again. As the sun begins to set, you arrive at the courier lodge, a halfway house for messengers that smells of horse ink and faint hope. Inside, there's a wall where veteran couriers leave carved messages, names, dates, complaints, and the occasional poem. You run your fingers over a line etched near the door. Let no word be late, though the road be long. There's comfort in that. You're part of a chain, a pulse, a rhythm that spans from palace to port to pasture. A courier in Tang China isn't just a delivery person. You are memory in motion. You are the nervous system of an empire that runs on information and incense paper and patience. You bed down on a straw mat, scroll tubes beside you like tiny sleeping dragons. Outside, the frogs begin to sing. You wake before the sun because of course you do. Tang couriers don't sleep in, not when their schedules are aligned, not just with the emperor's whims, but with rooster-based logistics. The lodge master rings a bamboo chime, a sound that means either breakfast is ready or you're late. You don't risk finding out which. Today's assignment takes you through mountainous terrain, steeper, colder, and definitely less forgiving than yesterday's sleepy orchard trails. Your saddle creaks as you mount up scrolls, bundled carefully under a waxed silk wrap. One bears a violet thread signifying imperial sentiment. The lodge master doesn't explain what that means, just raises his eyebrows and makes a vague circling motion over his heart. You hope it's a poem. You hope it's not a declaration of exile. The path narrows into a switchback of stone and snowmelt, flanked by pine trees and clouds that curl low like gossiping ghosts. Your horse, clearly not a fan of elevation, snorts disapproval at every sharp incline. You promise it warm oats later. It ignores you. Here, the reality of Tang postal life really starts to bite. The empire is vast at its height, stretching from Korea to Kazakhstan, and that ambition was only sustainable thanks to a complex network of postal relays. But maintaining those stations in remote or hostile terrain, a logistical nightmare. You pass a partially collapsed outpost, half swallowed by moss and melancholy. Someone scratched a message into the doorframe. No firewood, no tea, avoid in winter. Sound advice. This is what modern maps rarely show: how fragile the infrastructure could be when frost mudslides or bandits got involved. Many couriers traveled with concealed daggers, not just for protection, but for cutting scrolls loose. If ambushed, scrolls could be hidden, burned, or swallowed if necessary. And yes, there's at least one verified account of a courier digesting a message during capture. Historians still debate whether it was bravery or panic-driven indigestion. By mid-morning, you reach a cliffside shrine that doubles as a signal relay point. The monk stationed here barefoot, smelling faintly of yak butter and enlightenment, offers you tea and a bowl of rice porridge. He adds pickled mustard greens from a clay pot, explaining that the salt keeps him anchored to reality. You wonder briefly if that's just code for "I hate this job too." The monk tells you that when fog covers the mountain, they use bronze mirrors to flash signals from peak to peak. 3 short, 1 long urgent scroll, prepare horse. 4 slow flashes, danger, delay. A single prolonged gleam, courier requests soup. He's joking, you think. As you stretch your legs, he shares a quirky tale. Once a monkey stole a scroll pouch and became a minor local deity, after villagers found it scribbling in ash with its tail. There's a carving of the post monkey on a nearby rockstone lips, puckered like it's mid-dispatch. Monks, it turns out, were often critical nodes in the Tang courier system, not just for their geographic placement, but for their reading skills and memorization abilities. Some could recite entire proclamations verbatim after a single reading. It was like postal backup with prayer beads. Leaving the shrine, you descend into a fog bank so thick it feels like walking through steamed rice. Every sound is muffled: the chirp of a bird, the splash of a hoof, and for a few long moments you feel as though you're the only person left in the world. You find comfort in the regular jangle of your scroll tube buckles, proof that you're still tethered to your purpose. That's when you hear the cough, a low, deliberate cough. Not yours, not your horse's, and definitely not mountain wind. You slow your pace. Around the bend, half hidden in the mist, stands another courier robe's damp scroll tube, slung across one shoulder, and an expression somewhere between amusement and frostbite. He nods. You nod. It's the Tang equivalent of a high five. You trade names. Yours is registered in Chang'an, his in Dunhuang. His scroll is bound in black cord military dispatch. You both decide to camp early. There's no point racing through fog just to snap an ankle. You share dried plums, boiled river water, and courier gossip. One rider supposedly broke a record last week, 300 li in a single day, thanks to bribed horses and a tailwind blessed by a Taoist priest. You try not to sound impressed. You fail. Over the fire, your colleague shares a fringe postal legend of the night courier, a spectral figure who rides under moonlight, delivering imperial secrets no one's supposed to see. Appears only on the eve of rebellions. No one knows if he's a man, a ghost, or a metaphor. You think it's probably all three. He hands you a stick of pine resin to chew, a courier trick for fighting dry throat and boredom. It tastes like ambition and tree sap. Eventually, you drift to sleep under a shared oilcloth, your horse tethered nearby, eyes open as if guarding the scrolls. You dream of mirrors flashing like stars, of monkeys chanting postal codes, and of an imperial edict that simply reads, "You're doing fine." In the early light, your fellow courier is already gone, leaving only a heel of barley bread and a tiny paper crane tucked into your saddlebag. You're not sure what it means, but it feels like a blessing. You move on, because that's what couriers do. Whether there's fog, frost, or folklore, we move. The road flattens today, but that doesn't mean it's any kinder. You trudge through lowland marshes, the kind that squelch with every step and swallow cartwheels whole. The air smells like boiled pond and mismanaged infrastructure. Dragonflies buzz lazily, mocking you with their aerial grace. You are a mud-caked, scroll-laden slug in comparison. By now, the novelty of imperial courier life has worn off, rubbed raw like your heels in straw sandals. Every time you adjust your scroll satchel, it creaks like an elderly opinion. You remind yourself that this was once a dream job, carrying words across an empire trusted with secrets, stories and spam decrees about millet quotas. But here's the truth: the Tang postal network may have been revolutionary, but it was also famously bloated. You pass a roadside marker inscribed with the classic logistical mantra, "Timeliness is loyalty," charming and exhausting. You pause for lunch beside a stagnant canal where fish blink at you like disappointed uncles. A passing farmhand offers you half a turnip and a warning: the next station master is a poet. He'll delay you with riddles. You nod solemnly. Every profession has its hazards. And sure enough, as you arrive at the next relay post, built from mildewed timber and the hopes of better funding, a man greets you wearing ink-stained sleeves and an expression of practiced melancholy. This is Liang, station master and part-time verse enthusiast. He insists on inspecting your courier token, a lacquered bamboo tag stamped with your name, route, and official weight limit. Yes, weight limit. Scrolls may be noble, but Tang bureaucracy had strict rules. Anything over the quota and you're technically freight, not courier. It's an insult. Liang nods, satisfied, and invites you to tea. You've arrived exactly 18 strokes after mid-hour, he says, gesturing to a sundial with a bird skull mounted on top. A fortunate omen. You try not to laugh or cry. Liang shares a mainstream fact: between sips, Tang China maintained over 1,600 official courier stations, spaced about 30 li apart, each staffed with hostlers, scribes, and apparently aspiring poets. While your horse is swapped out for a less disgruntled model, Liang recites a few lines of his latest work. Oh, to be a letter unburdened by the mud, read by lovers at dusk. You nod. Nice enjambment, he beams. But beneath the verse lies a harsh truth. Maintaining this postal empire took a toll. Relay workers were poorly paid, often pressed into service by local magistrates. Some built tiny shrines to the kitchen god, just to pray for dry roofs and cooperative oxen. Others sabotaged their own inkwells to avoid having to scribe yet another receipt for goosefeather delivery. Liang confesses that he once rerouted a batch of redundant tax notices into the fire for morale reasons. He whispers it, even though the only other witness is a sleepy goat. There's a scholarly debate here that Liang touches on between pomegranate seeds. Did the Tang state overextend its communication system? Some argue the relay network became so massive, so rule-bound, that it slowed itself down like a bloated bureaucratic centipede. Others say it was the glue that held the empire together, administering far-flung provinces and reporting rebellions before they simmered into full boil. As you chew dried lotus root and wait for your fresh Mount Liang gifts, a curious item, a bundle of reed paper infused with camphor oil. Keeps moths off your scrolls, he explains. Also works on station inspectors. They hate the smell, practical and poetic. Your new horse is sprightly, clearly unaware of your penchant for terrible terrain. You thank Liang and head off with a final exchange of riddles. His goes. I speak without a mouth. I travel without feet. What am I? You grin. A courier. He claps like a child. You feel momentarily like a folk hero. The road winds now through bamboo groves, their leaves whispering secrets, in a breeze that smells faintly of ginger and regret. You pass other travelers, a cart piled high with lacquerware, a monk with a squirrel on his shoulder, and two women balancing baskets of snails and gossip. None of them look impressed by your scrolls. Fame is fleeting. Just before dusk, you reach a border station, a high-walled complex bristling with flags and suspicion. Here, even official couriers undergo inspection. You flash your tag, your seal, and your best "I am definitely authorized" smile. The gatekeeper, a woman with calloused hands and a feather in her bun, eyes your satchel. Any fermented goods? No, you reply honestly. Explosive bamboo. Not on purpose. She lets you through. Inside the station is humming oxen being fed couriers squabbling over route charts. A child practicing calligraphy on the floor with a stick of charcoal. You overhear a whispered report about bandits 3 provinces over, stealing nothing but official maps. Trying to start their own dynasty, someone jokes. You bunk down in a loft above the stables, the straw warm and only mildly infested. You scribble notes into your courier log, add a doodle of Liang's sundial skull, and tuck in with your scrolls bundled beneath your head. Just in case. Sleep comes slow. The station creaks. Horses snort. Somewhere below, someone is playing a bamboo flute, a soft looping tune that sounds like messages floating on wind. You think of Liang's poem. You think of snail baskets. You think of riddles without answers. You think of how your job isn't just to carry information, it's to connect the empire one muddy step at a time. Morning doesn't so much dawn as it slinks in through the gaps in the roof tiles, dragging with it a dull haze and the smell of boiled cabbage. You stir in your loft bed of hay, and bureaucratic resentment woken not by sunlight, but by the polite but insistent honking of a goose in the courtyard. Apparently the Tang postal system also had alarm geese. Efficient. Terrifying. You stretch brush straw from your tunic and descend into the relay station's courtyard. The other couriers are already in motion, feeding mounts, loading scrolls, arguing over map discrepancies. It's a chorus of purposeful chaos, and you're just one ink-stained note in the whole orchestration. Today's route takes you closer to the provincial capital. That means more checkpoints, more customs officials, and if you're truly blessed, at least 3 lectures on proper seal alignment from gate inspectors who peaked in school but never let go of their laminated credentials. The road is smoother here, flanked by cultivated fields and irrigation ditches. Water buffalo blink at you, slowly chewing their existential cud. You pass a group of scholars under a camphor tree, all arguing about a mistranslated Confucian verse. One of them is clearly just there for the snacks. As you ride, you recall a mainstream fact: the Tang postal system didn't only move government dispatches. It also carried grain reports, military orders, exam results, even imperial poetry. Occasionally, a lucky courier would be tasked with transporting a royal gift, a jade comb, a bolt of dyed silk, or in one infamous case, a mildly aggressive peacock. You breathe a sigh of relief that you've only got scrolls today. You stop at a small village just before midday. It's one of those places that doesn't appear on any map, but has existed longer than some dynasties. The local station is run out of a thatched hut attached to a tea house, dual-purpose efficiency at its finest. Inside, the station master greets you with the weary optimism of someone who's memorized every name on the courier roster. His name is Joe, and he's a fan of rules, the kind of fan who annotates the margins of rule books. He offers you tea and immediately asks to examine your courier seal. You produce it, etched wood lacquered black stamped with the imperial dragon in red cinnabar ink. Joe inspects it like a jeweler with a grudge. "Bit smudged," he mutters. You don't argue, you just sip your tea. Zhu is an expert in postal protocol and over-pickled plum snacks. He drops a few delightful insights. Did you know, he says, that relay horses are not to be used for unofficial errands, even if you're just fetching ginger root for a stomach complaint? It's imperial law. You nod, chewing slowly. He continues. And if a courier is found napping while waiting for dispatch, nap marks on the cheek, drool on the scrolls, they can be fined up to 12 strings of cash. You smile politely and cover your cheek with your sleeve. But Joe isn't just a bureaucrat. He's a hoarder of postal gossip. There was once a courier who tried to smuggle fermented bean curd to his cousin. The smell gave him away 2 stations later. Scrolls never recovered. Historians still argue whether strict enforcement of such petty rules actually improved courier performance or just bred resentment and hilariously inventive forms of smuggling. While Joe relays more stories, one involving a rogue monk and a crate of counterfeit stamps, you excuse yourself to use the outhouse and stretch your legs. The tea house courtyard is shaded by apricot trees, and a few older villagers sit playing wakey with smooth river stones. They glance up at you with mild curiosity, as if measuring how many dispatches you might be hiding in your sleeves. A small boy runs past with a kite shaped like a carp. It flutters above the tiled roofs, wobbling in the wind like an indecisive decree. Back on the road, the landscape tilts again upward, now into low hills, scattered with stone terraces. The view opens to hazy distances, fields, rivers, occasional flashes of temple rooftops. You stop at a milepost carved with faded calligraphy and a scratched-in haiku. The road never ends, but sometimes there is a breeze. Today is not that. Poetic vandalism, classic Tang. As the afternoon stretches thin, your route curves past a tax office. You dismount and walk your horse quietly. No one wants to be noticed near tax buildings. There's a known danger of volunteer auditing. Once a fellow courier got asked to help reconcile grain ledgers. He never recovered his will to gallop. A small scholarly debate surfaces in your thoughts. Was the Tang postal system actually designed more for surveillance than speed? Some argue the empire's obsession with scrolls and stamps was a way to monitor movement control officials and catch dissent before it became full-blown insurrection. Others believe it was simply about efficiency, connecting capital to countryside, decree to doorstep. You suspect it was both, with extra paperwork. Night begins to fall as you reach your final station for the day, a larger relay post near a river crossing. Lanterns sway from wooden beams, casting golden pools of light across the muddy road. You check in with a sleepy clerk who barely glances at your credentials before pointing you to the dormitory shed. "Stall 3, he says, as if you were livestock. "Charming. Inside the floor is packed dirt and smells faintly of mildew and boiled radish. But there's a cot, and that's enough. You sit down, remove your boots, and examine the calluses blooming across your feet like protest petitions. Your satchel is lighter now, scrolls delivered, and receipts signed. You scratch a quick note in your route log and tuck your courier seal under your blanket like a precious coin. Outside, frogs chirp. A bat flutters past the window, sounding like an envelope being torn very slowly. You close your eyes. You dream of rules written on clouds of stations shaped like teapots of geese that honk in perfect hexameter. And somewhere in that dream, Joe is still listing infractions. Morning finds you already semi-awake, brain-fogged, but limbs twitching toward action like they've been trained by bureaucracy itself. The soft splash of a paddle on water echoes nearby. The river traffic has started with merchant boats creaking and grunting against the current, like elderly accountants arguing over tax forms. You sit up, stretch, and take inventory. Courier seal, check. Satchel still with you. Feet somewhat attached. Spirit marginal. Today's ride promises fewer hills, but more humans. You're approaching a regional administrative hub, which means local governors, tax assessors, clerks with handwriting sharp enough to draw blood, and, of course, postal inspectors. You will be seen, questioned, evaluated, and possibly offered over-salted turnips while being lectured about signature placement. Again, you saddle up a relay horse with the unflappable patience of someone who knows the station will want it back in exactly the same condition down to the main parting. The beast sighs as you climb aboard. It knows this road. It knows your kind. The road follows the riverbank for a while, flanked by reeds, and the occasional willow drooping like it's disappointed in everyone. You pass a fisherman crouched on a rock, dangling a net, and humming an old tune that might be about fish or failed romances, same difference. A few miles in, you reach a ferry station, technically not part of the postal system, but used by couriers when bridges are scarce. The ferryman is asleep with his face pressed against a tea-drenched abacus. You knock politely on the deck with the hilt of your writing knife. He snorts awake and immediately starts blaming the tides. While you wait to cross, you review the scroll pouch contents. Most are sealed with red wax, but one bears the imperial gold, a rare sight used only for edicts from the palace. It's labeled Eyes Only Deputy Minister of Salt Revenues. You have no idea what that title entails, but you hope he likes rice cakes because that's what you're bringing for lunch. The ferry drifts across the current with all the urgency of a sleepy goose. Midway through, a family of ducks decides to escort the boat like it's a diplomatic envoy. You salute them out of boredom and receive a disapproving quack in return. Upon landing, the road tightens into a proper stone path, flanked by shrines and boundary markers. You pass a milepost carved with the Tang Dynasty's official postal code, a labyrinth of symbols and rules more confusing than a scholar's dating life. Mainstream historical fact-time Tang postal couriers were officially forbidden from reading the messages they carried. That said, plenty of them developed impressive skills in scroll weight estimation, wax seal analysis, and accidental unrolling during high wind. Nobody talks, but everybody knows. Soon, the towers of the administrative hub come into view, modest by imperial standards, but still full of sharp-shouldered buildings, wide streets, and people who wear indoor shoes outdoors to show off. You ride in straight-backed, trying not to look too windblown. The last thing you need is to be mistaken for a rural courier. Again, you head straight to the post registry building, a large structure of painted beams and tiled eaves, fronted by a low queue of other couriers' officials and one very confused duck merchant. Inside, everything smells of ink oil lamps and mild suspicion. A scribe in blue silk waves you forward. "Courier number," he asks, without looking up. You rattle it off, 7/4, border to capital inner relay. He hums, checks a ledger so thick it might contain personal grudges, then stamps your logbook with a woodblock that reads, "Received." The ink is still warm. You imagine someone's job is to keep the stamp ready at all hours, just in case the emperor himself drops by with a love letter. Then comes the inspection. A woman in crimson robes, clearly high up in postal hierarchy, beckons you to a side alcove. Her expression says she's not angry, just disappointed. In advance, she checks your seal for tampering, your route log for errors, and your scroll pouch for improper bundle density. Yes, that's a real term. She even sniffs your tunic. "Smells like turnips," she says. "Lunch," you reply. She raises an eyebrow. "You should eat faster." You nod solemnly as though she's just imparted great wisdom. She dismisses you with a flick of her sleeve, and you leave the building lighter, but also somehow heavier in soul. A fellow courier outside whispers, "Was it Mistress Lin?" You nod. He winces. "She once fined me for ink blot inconsistency." "Classic Lin," you murmur. You drop off the remaining scrolls at the central sorting hall. Here the bureaucracy transforms into its final form, endless rows of shelves, scroll tubes labeled with counties' titles and references you don't understand. One reads, "For review, by Office of Rice Metrics, Northern Wetlands." Another priority poetry contest results. You handle both with equal reverence. Lunch is a quick bite at a noodle stall run by an ex-scribe who swears he once copied an imperial decree with one hand while stirring broth with the other. He insists the key to good noodles is ink-thin broth and decree-thick noodles. You don't argue. He gives you a discount for postal valor. Historians still argue whether the Tang postal system reached this level of absurd complexity by design, or if it simply evolved like a coral reef of regulations, with layers of forgotten protocols calcified over centuries. Some believe it was brilliant. Others believe it was the original form of organized masochism. You finish your bowl, tip the scribe, and begin the walk back to the relay post. No more messages today. Just an evening of paperwork, horse brushing, and maybe, if you're lucky, a heated argument about map updates by candlelight. As twilight settles over the hub, you feel oddly content. The scrolls are gone, your feet are tired. The system, despite its flaws, is humming. You've done your part, however small, and tomorrow the road awaits again. The next morning, the postmaster hands you a scroll with no seal, no sender name, and only one instruction scratched faintly on the back. To be delivered in person, no substitutions, which in courier terms means good luck and try not to die. You don't ask questions, not because you're especially obedient, but because experience has taught you that mysterious scrolls tend to come with one of three endings: a promotion, a demotion, or an ulcer. Best to just roll with it. You set out early. The road this time cuts through low hills, where the mist clings to the trees like gossip in a tea house. Your horse's hooves strike the ground with that rhythmic clop-clop that's halfway between comforting and hypnotic. You munch on a rice dumpling wrapped in lotus leaf. It's filling, a bit too mysterious for comfort. Possibly mushroom, possibly frog. About an hour in, you pass a field of wheat, where a pair of farmers are arguing over whose ox is smarter. One insists his beast can understand poetry. The other claims his ox once bowed to a magistrate. You wave politely and keep going. You have neither time nor emotional stamina to debate livestock IQ before noon. The scroll's destination lies off the main route, accessible only by a narrow trail that snakes into the forest. It's not an official courier path, which means no rest stops, no tea stalls, and definitely no relay horses waiting with pre-massaged thighs. Just you, the trees, and the occasional squirrel that looks at you like it knows your secrets. You press on the canopy, thickening, turning the day dim and greenish. You begin to wonder if the trail will ever widen when you finally spot a small building, more hut than home, tucked behind a bamboo thicket. It's not marked except for a faded cloth hanging above the door, embroidered with the character for quiet. You dismount, tie the reins to a rock shaped suspiciously like a turtle, and knock gently. No answer. You knock again, louder this time. The door creaks open not by a hand, but because it was never latched in the first place. Inside the room smells like ink, old books, and medicinal herbs. A man sits at a low desk writing something with the care of someone who believes every stroke could change the fate of an empire. His robe is plain, his hair tied with twine. He doesn't look up when you step in. You're early, he says, or late, depending on which version of the schedule you're using. You hand him the scroll. He takes it without ceremony and sets it beside him, unopened. Good, he murmurs. Now I can forget it exists. You're not sure whether to bow, salute, or flee. Mainstream historical fact-time Tang Dynasty China was home to an elite class of record-keepers and policy scribes so secretive and specialized that their roles weren't even listed in public directories. These invisible hands ensured continuity of government during coups, famines, and periods of sudden fashion change. It's likely that some documents were never meant to be read, only delivered, filed, and hidden forever. The man finally looks at you. They still feed couriers boiled radish at the Southern Post. You nod. He sighs as if personally disappointed in the menu. I used to run those routes, he says, back when the roads were less crowded and the rules made slightly more sense. He gestures for you to sit on a stool carved from a single tree root. You'll rest here tonight. The forest is not kind to evening travelers. You don't argue. The idea of navigating deer trails in the dark with nothing but a half-eaten rice dumpling and a scroll receipt sounds like a tragic folk song waiting to happen. As you sit, he begins telling stories not about war or politics, but about logistics. A whole tale about how he once rerouted an entire courier line around a floodplain using only 6 oxen and a falsified eclipse report. You try to keep up, nodding at the right moments, unsure whether you're hearing a confession or a recruitment pitch. Then comes a quirkier detail. Apparently, at one point, someone in the imperial court tried to standardize postal ink by mixing it with crushed pomegranate rind. It worked beautifully, except in winter when the ink turned to sludge and glued scrolls shut. For a brief period, couriers had to warm their documents over fires before unrolling them. Historians still argue whether that was a chemical failure or just an elaborate metaphor. The man chuckles. The conversation drifts. You sip a cup of tea that tastes faintly of pine and molasses. Outside, the bamboo clicks gently in the wind. There is no sign of official stamps, no scrolls waiting for reply, just this little hut suspended between duties. Later, just before bed, the man says something odd. There's a ledger no one reads, a record of how far the couriers walk each day, not for payroll, just for honor. You blink. Does it matter? To someone, it always matters. You sleep on a reed mat near the fire, wrapped in a blanket that smells like rain and charcoal. In the night, a fox cries in the distance, or maybe it's just the wind mimicking lost things. Morning comes with the sound of sparrows and the rustle of scroll paper. The man is gone. In his place is a small package wrapped in cloth marked with your number and a note. Deliver this on your way back. No explanation, just a continuation. And so you tie the package to your satchel, resaddle the horse, and retrace the winding path through the forest. The road, as always, remains indifferent, but the weight on your back feels different now, not heavier, just acknowledged. By the time you return to the main postal route, the sky has turned the color of weak tea, washed out, and warm with no real threat of rain, but plenty of dramatic cloud formations pretending they might get serious. Your horse is in better shape than you expected, probably because it hasn't been burdened with existential dread or tightly wrapped mystery packages. You stop briefly at a roadside shrine dedicated to the god of direction, whose clay statue has been worn down to little more than a smiling lump with suspiciously well-maintained eyebrows. You leave a pebble and a pinch of salt standard offerings for good guidance, and if you're honest, for better soup later. The next way station on your route is Jiazhou, a town best known for having exactly the wrong number of bridges. Too many in dry seasons, too few when the rivers swell. This is the place where courier routes and flood paths play a strange game of musical chairs. Sometimes entire deliveries get held up because someone's ox refused to cross the 5th bridge on a Tuesday. You arrive just as the town market is winding down. The smells of pickled plum and fish paste hang in the air like old gossip. A bored official in a red tassel hat signs your logbook without making eye contact and points you toward a row of straw mats behind the courier shed. Sleep there. Try not to bleed on anything. Charming. Tonight's rest is accompanied by the chatter of frogs and the occasional argument from 2 nearby coppersmiths who apparently share one hammer and no patience. You're almost asleep when a runner, barefoot, breathless, appears out of the night, holding a crimson-marked scroll. Emergency seal. That means something has gone wrong somewhere, and someone very far away wants to yell about it using you as the yelling stick. You're assigned to take the message northward toward Chenzhou through a mountain pass that's as famous for its cherry blossoms as it is for its bandits. It's a scenic route if you ignore the looming threat of robbery rockslides or wild boars with boundary issues. You set out at first light. The road snakes upward through forests that smell like damp bark and secrets. Your legs ache, your back protests, but your mind, well, your mind has achieved that special courier state of detachment, not quite numb, not quite serene, just distant enough to mistake discomfort for normalcy. Mainstream historical fact alert. The Tang postal system relied on a strict hierarchy of urgency seals. Blue for routine, green for important, red for emergencies, and gold, rare and terrifying, for imperial eyes only. Scrolls with red or gold markings often moved through relay stations at night, bypassing sleep and safety for speed. If one of those passed through your hands, congratulations. You were now part of history, or at least a footnote in someone's disciplinary hearing. Somewhere along the way, you stop at a mountain relay post, manned by a retired soldier who brews a medicinal tea, so bitter it might legally qualify as a curse. He insists it strengthens the kidneys. You suspect it mostly strengthens his sense of power over guests. While he stokes the fire, you learn that the pass ahead has been blocked not by bandits or snow, but by a bureaucratic debate over whose jurisdiction the trail falls under. Apparently, 2 adjacent prefectures have each assigned a different toll collector to the same ridge, and neither is budging. Result: no official permission to proceed. Historians still argue whether Tang-era bureaucratic gridlock was a flaw in the system or a feature the old soldier says, staring into the fire like someone who's lost too many arguments to win gracefully. You could wait for clarification from above, but waiting means losing time, and time in courier math is the difference between promotion and having to deliver scrolls on foot while eating boiled turnip 3 meals a day. So you do what every sensible courier does. When 2 bureaucrats get in the way, you go around them. Literally. You leave the trail at dawn, cutting through a pine grove, then along a goat path that smells like well goats. The detour adds half a day to your trip, but avoids toll collectors' local tax debates and at least one small feud involving bridge maintenance and a stolen cooking pot. By the time you reach Chenzhou, your horse is chewing your satchel in protest, your boots are wet from fording a suspicious puddle, and your red-sealed scroll is intact but deeply wrinkled. You hand it off to a courier master with hawk-like eyes and a mole shaped like a question mark. She inspects the seal, nods once, and without a word, hands you a steamed bun stuffed with pickled mustard greens. Eat, she says, Then you can report your detour. You chew slowly, partly because the mustard greens fight back and partly because your jaw is locked from clenching too long. You recount the toll collector standoff, the pine grove, the goat path, and the questionable puddle. She listens without blinking. Approved, she says. Creative route, reasonable risk. You blink back. That's it. No reprimand, no long speech about regulations. She shrugs. The scroll got here. The rest is paperwork. She returns to her ledger. You sit in the corner nursing your bun and a sore shoulder and realize something strange. Despite everything, you don't hate this job. Not really. There's a rhythm to it. A strange kind of poetry. It's just bureaucratic enough to be maddening, but just flexible enough to reward cleverness. And sometimes on good days, someone offers you tea that doesn't taste like ground beetles. Your rest in Chenzhou is blessedly uneventful, aside from a flock of geese that stage an ambush outside the courier stables. You suffer only minor pride damage and a shoe soaked in goose-related vengeance. No injuries, no new scrolls, and miracle of miracles, a warm basin of water to soak your feet. You dare to exhale fully. But just as you begin to enjoy your brief reprieve, a clerk arrives with a message sealed in green wax. Important, not urgent, but it's heading west toward a region known for its unpredictable weather and even more unpredictable officials. You pack your satchel again, accept a dried yam from the cook with a wink that says you'll need it, and hit the road. The route to Luanshui is less traveled, more winding. The terrain shifts from gentle slopes to rocky ravines, all framed by forests that rustle like gossiping courtiers. Along the way, you pass an abandoned way station, charred beams, moss-covered stones, a shrine toppled sideways. Rumor says it burned during a tax revolt. The only thing left standing is the outhouse, inexplicably intact and still slightly in use. You don't linger. By afternoon, the sky becomes moody. Not dramatic enough for a storm, but definitely threatening to read you its poetry. Gray hangs heavy over the hills, pressing the color out of everything. The only brightness comes from your travel pass red ink stamps, from 3 prefectures, each one partially smudged. You hope the next official in Luanshui doesn't mind bureaucratic Rorschach art. Luanshui is a river town that smells of wet rope and spiced duck. You arrive soaked but mostly upright. The postmaster here is a wiry man who speaks only in proverbs and shrugs. The scroll finds the hand, he says, plucking the message from your satchel. The horse drinks, but the river stays. You nod as if this makes sense. You're assigned a loft above the stable's bare wood, one flickering lantern, and a mouse who refuses to negotiate on room boundaries. But it's dry. You unroll your mat, stretch your back, and listen to the river slapping against the docks. Sleep comes in fits, interrupted by dreams of twisted roads and endless seal colors. In the morning, you help repack saddlebags for another courier, this one a teenage girl with a scar down her left forearm and a collection of lucky charms sewn into her cloak. She shares a rumor the Ministry of Works has started experimenting with waterproof scroll cases. Cow intestines boiled and dried. Smell awful, but no leaks. Mainstream historical fact. The Tang postal system did in fact innovate transport materials. They introduced waxed cloth pouches, oiled bamboo cylinders, and even clay-sealed scroll jars for extremely sensitive documents. These weren't always reliable, but they were better than paper mush after a rainstorm. As you head out of Luanshui, you follow a newly repaired road straight and smug, funded by a recent tax hike. It feels stable under your boots, but eerily empty. No other couriers, no market carts, just a single melon vendor humming to himself, dragging a handcart as if chased by invisible deadlines. A little further on, you reach a checkpoint. Here things get complicated. 2 guards wave you over. One checks your pass while the other flips through your logbook like it's his bedtime novel. After a long silence and several sighs, They inform you that your travel permit's ink is not sufficiently dark. Not fake, just faded. This could be a forgery, one says, squinting as if the scroll might confess. You suggest they use their lamp to see better. They respond by confiscating your horse. It's not theft. It's preventative reassignment pending verification. There's paperwork. You sign it. You don't smile. Historians still argue whether Tang checkpoint corruption was systemic or situational. The other guard notes with all the glee of someone quoting policy to an audience that can't clap back. You continue on foot. The terrain grows steep against terraced hillsides, patched with tea shrubs and shouting farmers. You bribe a goat herder for a lift down the steepest slope. The goat, to its credit, is very professional. By the time you reach the outskirts of Yuanyang, your boots are down to flaps, your last yam is mostly pebbles, and your patience is a theoretical concept. You're greeted not by the postmaster but by a junior scribe who refuses to touch your travelogue because it's creased in a disrespectful way. You write a polite report about the checkpoint incident, underlining the part where your horse was still chewing hay when it was reassigned. The scribe yawns and stamps it without reading. You swear quietly in rhyme, then report to the courier dormitory, a bamboo shack with 7 bunks and exactly 1 pillow. That night, a storm rolls in. Not gentle, not poetic, the kind of storm that feels personal. Wind shrieks through the eaves, rain attacks the roof like it owes it money, and the lanterns flicker like ghosts, trying to decide whether to stay. You lie awake counting leaks in the ceiling. The others sleep through it except for one elderly courier who snores in rhythmic bursts that somehow match the thunderclaps. You wonder if this is a form of enlightenment. Before dawn, someone rouses you with a nudge and a scroll. This one's sealed in blue routine, but the destination, a remote archive tower near the border, reachable only by a rope bridge and optimism. You sigh, check your satchel, and begin mentally preparing for another day of being mistaken for a very determined delivery pigeon. You leave Yuanyang under skies still muttering from the storm. The clouds have lightened but not cleared more, like a bureaucrat who's not angry, just disappointed. The ground squelches under your boots, each step squashing damp leaves, displaced pebbles, and the ghosts of better travel decisions. The path toward the border archive is narrower than advertised. In fact, it may not be a path at all. The map shows a dotted line. The terrain gives you mud ferns and an inquisitive wild chicken who trails you for half a mile like it suspects you're smuggling grains. The scroll is light, but its importance weighs heavy. Blue seal, yes, but with an official brushstroke that suggests bureaucratic tension, something about land records or tax boundaries or ancestral property disputes that stretch back to dynasties no one liked. You don't know the contents, but you do know one thing: if the wrong person opens it, there will be committee meetings. The way narrows again now, just a thread carved into hillside. Bamboo groves close in on both sides, whispering secrets in the wind. You slip twice, curse creatively, and almost lose a sandal in what may have once been a drainage ditch and is now just a philosophical puddle. At last you reach the infamous rope bridge. Let's be clear, bridge is generous. It's 3 ropes and a shared illusion of structural integrity. The planks are uneven, some missing entirely. Below is a steep ravine filled with rocks sharp enough to draft their own grievances. And naturally, it's swaying. Always swaying, like a bureaucratic mood swing in physical form. You don't look down much. Crossing it requires faith, balance, and, let's be honest, questionable judgment. Halfway through, the wind picks up. You clutch the side ropes and repeat a mantra. You are not a scroll. You are not replaceable. Miraculously, you make it across. The archive tower sits squat and silent on the other side. 3 stories, stone base, wooden frame. A bronze bell hung crooked near the eaves. You knock. No answer. You knock again. The door creaks open on its own classic. Inside, it smells like dust ink and boiled cabbage. An old archivist emerges from behind a screen, blinking as if your presence interrupts a 10-year conversation with a wall. He wears 4 layers of robes and no shoes. You hand over the scroll. He nods once, then places it in a cedar drawer without ceremony. "Would you like tea?" he asks. You sit. He pours. The tea is bitter but hot, and that's enough. Mainstream historical fact Tang Dynasty archives were incredibly detailed, often storing records for centuries. Many were kept in provincial towers like this, built to survive war weather and incompetent governors. These record keepers wielded real power. Nothing moved without the right paper trail. The archivist speaks little, mostly hums. He shows you a wall covered in shelves, each scroll labeled in tiny calligraphy. One is labeled Tax Dispute Goose Theft 702 CE. Another reads simply Forbidden Pickles. You ask no questions. Quirky historical tidbit. In some Tang regions, citizens were required to register livestock, including particularly feisty geese, to avoid theft claims. The official paperwork included height coloring and known behavioral patterns. This led to the world's first known wanted poster for a goose named Jing Fang. You spend the night in a spare cot above the archive. It's warmer than expected, with a blanket that smells faintly of ink and sage. The bell above the tower tolls once during the night, though no one seems to ring it. You assume it's haunted, and at this point you're fine with that. At dawn, the archivist sends you off with a new scroll, this one crimson-sealed and double-wrapped in silk. High priority, he says, but not urgent, like gout. You don't ask. The return journey is faster. Maybe it's the adrenaline. Maybe it's the goat that charges you halfway back across the rope bridge and reminds you why courier boots need reinforced soles. You reach a road and rejoin the network at a major outpost. Here things are much busier. Couriers gather like pigeons on a roof, comparing ink stamps, sipping tea, trading spare cloak pins, and opinions on saddle wax. A middle-aged courier named Shun regales the group with tales of being mistaken for a ghost in a remote village after delivering a scroll during a funeral. They tried to burn my shoes as an offering, he says. I liked those shoes. Historians still argue whether Tang couriers were admired folk heroes or mostly ignored government tools. Some local ballads praise their bravery. Others describe them as paper donkeys. The Crimson Scroll is bound for a magistrate's estate 3 towns over. The postmaster there is reportedly obsessed with protocol. You double-check your travel permit, smooth out your logbook, and try to memorize your respectful greetings. Of course, you arrive during a festival. Lanterns everywhere, drums echoing through the narrow streets, children firing rice flour darts at each other, shrieking with delight. The magistrate's office is hidden behind a wall of paper dragons and grilled dumpling smoke. You push through scroll in hand clothes, singed slightly by an over-enthusiastic fireworks cart. Inside, the magistrate receives you with all the warmth of a tax audit. He sniffs, examines the crimson seal, and mutters something about finally. He asks if you were delayed. You point to the still smoking sleeve of your robe and the soot in your eyebrows. He nods. Acceptable. He stamps your delivery log with a rare gold ink emblem. You resist the urge to frame it. That night you sleep in a guest cot near the office courtyard under strings of still glowing lanterns. Their light flickers softly across your eyelids. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a flute, slow, meandering, wistful. You drift off thinking about that goose from 702 CE. You awaken to the smell of roasted millet and the rustle of silk robes. The magistrate's estate, now washed in morning light, reveals itself to be less imposing and more absurdly intricate. A maze of paper screens, koi ponds, and seemingly endless bonsai trees trimmed within an inch of their lives. You suspect a dedicated team of bureaucrats exists just to maintain the harmony of the foliage. Breakfast is offered in silent steamed buns and tea with a floral bite. You thank your host with a bow so deep your knees pop. The magistrate expression neutral as always gestures to a fresh scroll on the table. "This one goes north," he says. "Farther than you're used to. Mountain routes. Snow, probably." Snow, in your courier uniform. You try not to shiver. This new scroll is large, wrapped in oiled leather and bound with a jade token. You ask about the contents. He raises one brow. "Water rights, very serious," which of course in bureaucratic terms means lives have been ruined over it. You set off through winding roads bordered by frost-kissed reeds. The villages grow smaller, more scattered. Chickens cross the road with deep existential purpose. Occasionally, you stop to warm your hands by roadside shrines where incense smolders and gods look mildly amused. Mainstream historical fact. The Tang postal network spanned thousands of miles, including highland routes with dedicated snow couriers who used animal hide boots and sleighs when needed. Seasonal posts were outfitted with warm soup, thicker bedding, and replacement boots, not out of kindness, but because replacing frozen couriers was bad for efficiency. Halfway through your journey, you arrive at a lonely hill station run by two elderly sisters, both former couriers. They greet you like a lost nephew, sit you down by a brazier, and feed you something between stew and science experiment: fermented turnip broth with floating dumplings the size of your fist. You try not to ask questions. The elder sister Liu insists on reading your fortune in tea leaves. You see what looks like a bird. She says it's a tax decree. Same thing, she chuckles. Both have wings and ruin your weekend. Quirky historical tidbit. Some Tang postal workers, especially in remote regions, developed superstitions and folk rituals to charm safe travels, leaving coin offerings at mile markers, whispering apologies to carrier pigeons, and even composing short poems to their horses to keep them from going lame. The fire crackles. Snow begins to drift outside. Liu offers you a padded cloak that smells of dried plum and mildew. You accept without hesitation. You leave at dawn the next day, stomach slightly off, but heart warm from the send-off. The route climbs steadily, each step crunching through fresh powder. Pine trees line the slope's branches, heavy with snow. The only sounds are your breath and the creak of your leather satchel. Eventually, you crest a ridge and look down on a broad mountain valley, where smoke curls from 3 small homes. Your destination, the magistrate's northern counterpart, is less refined, no flowing silks or palace walls. Just a squat building with cracked tiles, a desk made from repurposed wine crates, and a clerk asleep beneath a fur blanket who grunts when you enter. You deliver the scroll. He nods and tucks it under the wine crate desk like it's just another tedium. Then he pulls out a tin pot, fills it with glacial water, and lights a tiny stove. Tea again. Always tea. This one is smoky and strong, nearly medicinal. He slides a second scroll towards you. No words, just a look. Back on the trail. Historians still argue whether Tang couriers were exploited laborers or privileged agents of imperial will. The truth, as usual, probably depends on the region. Here, in the quiet snow, it feels like a sacred duty carried out by very cold people with excellent lung capacity. Your next delivery takes you down the mountain's shadow side, steeper, icier, and more treacherous. You fall once, land on your pride, once more on your hip. Your boots skid over a frozen stream. At one point, a goat watches you slip, then turns away, with what feels like judgment. You pass a weathered milestone etched with a poem. Courier soul swift as snow letters, pass where moonlight go. Ink is law and wind is friend. Till scroll is read, the path won't end. You whisper it aloud. It helps, a little. At the base of the slope is a wayside inn, low, squat, half buried in snow but radiating warm light from its latticed windows. Inside, a roaring fire stew on the boil, and half a dozen couriers recounting their near-death experiences with cheerful fatalism. You recognize one of them, Shun, from earlier. He lifts a cup and shouts, "Still alive, paper legs." You sit by the fire, thawing slowly. Someone plays a two-string erhu near the hearth, the melody soft and melancholy. You lean back against a beam and close your eyes. Later that night, over rice wine and bean cakes, the innkeeper tells a tale of a courier who once delivered a letter across an avalanche zone, using only skis, a bamboo pole, and the will of 5 mountain gods. No one believes it. Everyone loves it. You sleep on a floor mat warm beneath 3 blankets and the weight of 10,000 miles of bureaucracy. The next morning, you're given one final scroll, thin lacquer sealed, tied in red string. Destination: Imperial Capital. You take a long breath and begin the descent. Through frost-bitten trees, along frozen ridges, past a small shrine to the god of slippery trails, where someone has left a banana peel as an offering. You chuckle, step carefully, and continue south. Your boots are soaked, your scroll is intact, and your sense of direction is tenuous. But somehow you're back on the main imperial route, winding its disciplined path toward the capital. The snow has given way to frost-bitten mud, and each squelch underfoot reminds you that dignity is optional in Tang postal work. You pass familiar mile markers, red lacquered pillars topped with carved lotus buds, spaced evenly by government decree. The roads here are wider, better kept. Merchants, pilgrims, and monks share the trail with you. Now their chatter and carts adding noise to what was once a mountain monk's silence. One merchant passes you a slice of dried persimmon with a wink. You accept it like treasure. The capital approaches not with sudden splendor, but with creeping complexity. Outposts grow into hamlets, hamlets into towns, towns into bureaucratic suburbs buzzing with civil servants who've never walked more than 10 li in their lives. Mainstream historical fact: Chang'an, the Tang capital, was one of the most meticulously planned cities in ancient history. Its grid layout divided into wards, patrolled nightly by watchmen, and strictly enforced curfews. Every incoming courier was logged, inspected, and occasionally interrogated for rumors or news. You reach a checkpoint manned by 2 guards in lacquered armor. They eye your scroll. One sniffs your cloak. Turnip broth, he guesses. You nod. He lets you pass. Inside the city walls, everything shifts. Sounds echo differently. Horses are forbidden in many wards, so carts creak by on wooden wheels. Bells chime from distant towers, announcing the hour or an edict or maybe a tax increase. It's hard to tell anymore. You find the courier hall tucked between a spice market and a temple where monks chant so rhythmically, you briefly wonder if they moonlight as drummers. The hall is less glamorous than you imagined. A single-story building, faded banners, a door that sticks when pushed. Inside, chaos, ink pots, scroll racks, shouting clerks. The place smells like ambition and mildew. You hand your lacquered scroll to a bored administrator who peels open the string with the delicacy of a crab-cracking shell. He grunts at the contents. Delayed. Good. If it had arrived yesterday, someone would have been fired. Quirky historical tidbit. Tang administrators often timed certain messages to arrive late on purpose, especially when delivering bad news. A delayed scroll could mean the difference between a cushioned reassignment or exile to snake-infested frontier posts. You're handed a stamped receipt on silk. Keep this, they say, in case someone accuses you of fraud. Also, it makes great kindling. You wander back outside and find a food stall selling fried tofu and tea eggs. You devour 3 without shame. An old man next to you gnaws on a chicken foot and tells you the city's postal pigeons are planning a coup. You nod solemnly. Historians still argue whether the Tang Dynasty's postal clerks functioned more like civil servants or secret informants. Many believe they filled both roles, delivering messages and delivering subtle commentary back to superiors, a sort of ancient Yelp review with tea stains. As evening falls, you visit a bathhouse, the finest your stipend allows. It's mostly steam-stone benches and men complaining about sand getting in their ink brushes. You soak in hot water laced with chrysanthemum oil and feel the mountain sludge drain from your bones. You close your eyes, you breathe, and then someone mentions a new courier directive coming down from the Ministry of Rights, something about standardized knot-tying procedures. You groan so audibly the steam trembles. Afterward, you're given a bed at the courier barracks. It's a long hall with bamboo mats and oil lamps. Every wall is covered with pinned memos. Some are official postings. Others are doodles jokes or passive-aggressive haikus aimed at co-workers who steal ink. You drift off to sleep to the snores of fellow messengers and the creak of the wind sliding past paper windows. Morning, scroll again. This time your route stays within the city across 6 wards to the palace archives. It should be simple. It is not. Each ward has a different entry rule. One requires a feather token, another proof of prayer at a local shrine, a third simply wants a bribe. You navigate this with practiced exhaustion, collecting stamps, chants, and curses. At the final gate, a clerk tells you to wait for the appropriate bell, which rings every 47 minutes and signals when it is auspicious to deliver imperial correspondence. You try to argue. The clerk offers you a rice cake and a shrug. You wait. Eventually, the bell tolls, and you're allowed into the palace records hall. Tall stone walls, dragon motifs, a ceiling painted like the sky. Scrolls stored in endless lacquered drawers. Monks with steel brushes write characters as if taming dragons. Your scroll is logged, catalogued, and sealed into a bronze canister. You sign 3 times bow twice and recite a short verse about responsibility. You are dismissed. Outside dusk. You walk through the eastern gate of the city and find a courtyard lined with lanterns. An old woman plays a flute. A child chases fireflies with a net made of thread and wishful thinking. You sit on a bench exhausted and write your own message on a scrap of bark paper. Made it. Didn't die. Will do again, begrudgingly. You tuck it into your satchel, not to deliver, but to remember. Then you stand, stretch your back, and check the board at the courier hall. New route 800 Li south. Of course it is. You rise at dawn again. Your knees pop like old wood, your joints ache like an overused abacus, and the idea of another 800 Li journey fills your soul with the same joy as finding a beetle in your porridge. But you're a Tang courier, and complaining is reserved for nobles and poets. Breakfast is simple steamed millet, pickled turnip, and tea, so bitter it might have been brewed with regret. A scribe at the mess hall insists it's good for the spleen. You nod politely and wonder what he's got against flavor. You sling your satchel over your shoulder, check the courier board again, and scan your route south, then southeast, skirting the hills near Luoyang, before veering toward a river outpost, whose name translates roughly to place where horses collapse. Perfect. Mainstream historical fact. The Tang Dynasty maintained a vast interconnected postal road network called the Yizhan system. These stations offered lodging, fresh mounts, and food to imperial messengers, at least in theory. In practice, many were overrun, underfunded, or confused about what century they were operating in. As you make your way out of the capital, you pass a familiar sight, an old man tending to a message pigeon with a splint on its wing. He nods at you like you're part of some weary fraternity. You nod back, equal parts honored and horrified. By mid-morning, the sun is gentle and golden. You walk alongside a canal where a barge filled with silkworm baskets drifts slowly pulled by a tired ox and an even more tired teenager. The teen waves. You wave back. Nobody's in a hurry. Then, of course, rain. It starts with polite sprinkles, then ramps up to a full curtain of drizzle. Your scroll is wrapped in oiled cloth, your hair is not. You smell like wet bark and imperial obligation. By afternoon, you stop at a way station. The roof leaks. The innkeeper's child offers you a stool and a bowl of hot congee unasked. You thank her and she disappears again into the kitchen, humming a folk tune about ducks and debt. You hang your satchel near the fire using an iron hook fashioned from a broken stirrup. The innkeeper mutters about the old days when Tang messengers rode horses, not soaked through their boots on foot. You nod, then ask about his horses. He laughs for a full 10 seconds before wheezing, "Last one was eaten by tax collectors." Quirky historical tidbit. Some remote postal stations were so resource-starved they bartered mounts with local farmers or used goats as short-range messengers, though these substitutions rarely ended well for either party. You sleep on a bamboo mat near the hearth, lulled by the sound of dripping and the rhythmic squeak of someone sharpening a cleaver in the next room. Not comforting but familiar. Come morning, the rain has passed and the world feels washed, if still a little soggy. You resume your journey with sore calves and renewed sarcasm. Fields stretch on both sides of the road. Tea, rice, and wild chrysanthemums. A farmer calls out, "Messenger, what's the capital tax this year?" You shrug. Depends who you ask and how loudly. By midday, you hit trouble. A local magistrate has cordoned off a bridge for repairs. No tools in sight. Just a rope, a sign, and a man playing a lute badly. You consider swimming, then reconsider due to leeches and dignity. Eventually, you find a ferryman willing to take you across for the price of 2 coins and a song. You hand over the coins and mumble the chorus of a drinking ballad about goats and ex-wives. He finds it passable. You float across, staring up at clouds shaped like scrolls and kitchen knives. Historians still argue whether these impromptu tolls were legally sanctioned or opportunistic highway hustles. Some documents suggest officials were allowed to collect road improvement gifts, while others hint at widespread corruption dressed up in ceremonial robes. You reach your destination at sunset. It's less of a post town and more of a hut beside a cliff, with a wooden sign reading "Official Courier Drop Zone, please scream upon arrival." Inside is a lone clerk with ink-stained fingers and a beard shaped like an overgrown bookmark. He doesn't look up as you enter. Scroll. You hand it over. He nods once, scribbles a receipt, and gestures toward a damp cot in the corner. "Stay the night if you need. Rats are friendly." You take the cot. You lie flat. You stare at the ceiling beam's rough-hewn wood, a spider web, a dangling onion braid. A wind picks up outside. It smells like pine parchment and the faint memory of home. Before sleep takes you, you hear the clerk whisper to himself, "2 more scrolls and I retire. Just 2 more. You smile. You hope he makes it. You wake in the pre-dawn haze, your spine creaking like an old market cart. The cot is hard, but the silence is soft. Outside, a rooster attempts a crow, fails halfway through, and presumably goes back to sleep. You envy him. You gather your satchel, double-check that you haven't left a sock or fragment of sanity behind, and step back into the Tang Dynasty's favorite hobby, walking. The path ahead is rocky, winding through low hills, blanketed in dew and the subtle hum of crickets. Today is your final delivery. One last scroll, one final destination. And if your luck holds a night in a bed that doesn't smell like mildew and bureaucratic regret. Mainstream historical fact: Tang messengers could only cover limited distances per day depending on weather terrain and the reliability of relay stations. A single scroll might take weeks to reach its destination, depending on its level of urgency and bureaucratic rank. Your route takes you past a shrine to the horse spirit draped in fading red silks and peppered with offerings, mostly dried plums and coins, with holes worn nearly smooth. You pause for a moment, place a bean bun beside the incense dish, and whisper, "Please don't let this road collapse today." It feels right. Further along, a pair of monks flag you down, asking for news from the capital. You give them the short version: taxes are high, the eunuchs are squabbling again, and someone tried to outlaw string instruments in government buildings. They nod solemnly, like this is somehow expected. One of them gives you a baked yam in return. You eat it in 3 bites. By midday, you reach the cliffside trail carved during the reign of Emperor Taizong. It's barely wide enough for 2 humans or 1 nervous ox. The stone is slick, the air thin, and the drop dramatic. Quirky historical tidbit. Some Tang postal routes involved cliff-skirting paths so dangerous that couriers were issued sandals with rope treads and were blessed by local temple priests before departure. Others simply tied letters to carrier birds and hoped for the best. You mutter encouraging things to your own feet. Just a little further, you're heroes. Ignore the sound of crumbling gravel and finally arrive at the mountaintop relay outpost, just as the afternoon light begins to slant golden across the valley. This station is different. It's clean, quiet. A well-fed dog naps under the gate. The clerk, a woman this time, greets you with tea and asks if your name is really Whispers at Dawn, as written in the log. You explain it's a nickname. She nods. Like that explains everything. You hand over the scroll. She stamps it with a jade seal. You've done it. You're the last leg, she says, stretching. This goes no further. Capital report. Direct to regional governor. You nod, smile, then blink. Historians still argue whether couriers were fully aware of the importance of the messages they carried, or if they preferred the bliss of plausible deniability. Some scrolls may have contained poetry, others declarations of war, and occasionally both. The clerk invites you to stay for supper. There's fried tofu, wild greens, and a fermented bean sauce that smells like ancestral gossip. You eat until full, then sit outside watching the sun drop behind the jagged teeth of the mountains. The wind carries temple chimes from somewhere far below. The dog shifts in its sleep, chasing dream rabbits' paws twitching, and then you feel it. Not relief, not even pride, just a kind of strange stillness, as if the world has briefly acknowledged your footsteps across its ancient back. You look at your hands, calloused, scarred, still ink-stained from the last leg's receipt. You've carried messages, stories, edicts, recipes, confessions, and now you sleep. You lie on a mat stuffed with hay and good intentions under a roof that doesn't leak, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of sage. Outside, the stars begin their slow, quiet dance. Inside, you close your eyes. The Tang postal system churns on without complaint, and you, humble courier, are finally off duty. The fire in the hearth has dwindled now, no more than a handful of amber coals, pulsing with the memory of heat. You lie still beneath your blanket, the rough weave softening with the warmth of your body, the straw underneath, gently shifting with each exhale. Outside, the mountain air has cooled, but not enough to bite. It strokes the window shutters and ruffles the edge of the paper screen, a delicate lullaby for those who've traveled far. You don't need to speak anymore, not tonight. Let the words and scrolls and messages drift into silence. Let the echoes of footsteps fade into packed dirt paths and forgotten forest turns. You've walked enough. Above you, stars blink softly, ancient, constant, humming their stories across time. Their names are unknown to you, but their rhythm is familiar. Rest, breathe, return. Somewhere a bell tolls, not urgent, just marking the hour. A small reminder that time continues, but you are allowed to pause. Even the empire, with all its stamps and scrolls and seals, can wait. Let your muscles unclench. Let your mind loosen its grip on the weight of distant capitals and rain-slick bridges. You are clean. You are carried. You are part of something vast and human and deeply, quietly ridiculous. Sleep now. Dream slow.